All right, so are you ready to dive into one of the most enduring mysteries in American history?
Oh, absolutely. Always up for a good mystery.
Well, this one has it all. We're talking about the D.B. Cooper hijacking.
Yeah, the case that just won't quit.
Exactly. And you've sent us a ton of material, Wikipedia entries, news articles, even some opinion pieces. Seems like you really want to get to the bottom of this.
Someone's done their homework.
So let's get right to it. For those who might need a refresher, it all went down on November 24th, 1971.
Thanksgiving Eve. Quite the day for a hijacking.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so picture this. A man calling himself Dan Cooper boards Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305.
A Boeing 727, right?
Yep, heading from Portland to Seattle. Seems pretty routine, right?
At first glance, totally. Just another flight.
But then, mid-flight, Cooper passes a note to a flight attendant.
Oh, this is where things get interesting.
And this wasn't your average, can I get some extra peanuts kind of note.
Right.
This one claimed he had a bomb.
Whoa, a bomb on a plane. Talk about terrifying.
And get this, he had some very specific demands. $200,000 in ransom and 4 parachutes.
That escalated quickly. So what happened next?
Well, they land in Seattle, let the passengers off the plane.
But the crew stays on board.
Right, with Cooper. They refueled, and then he orders them to fly towards Mexico City with a planned refueling stop in Reno, Nevada.
Bold move. So this guy had a plan.
That he did. Okay, so now imagine this. It's dark, the plane takes off, they're about 30 minutes into the flight, somewhere over southwestern Washington.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What happens?
Cooper does the unthinkable. He lowers the aft air stair, grabs the ransom money, and jumps out of the plane into the night.
Wow, just vanished. Gone without a
You
trace.
got it. It's unbelievable, right? You'd think with all the technology we have now, they'd have solved this case by now.
You'd think so. It's a real head scratcher.
And to make things even more interesting, there's the whole ransom money mystery.
Ah, yes, the money. That's a whole other rabbit hole.
Years later, in 1980, a portion of it shows up along the Columbia River, found by a young boy, no less.
It wasn't just loose bills, though, right? It was in bundles.
You're right. Bundled packets of $20 bills, and some were even missing bills. Talk about strange.
Yeah, like why not take all of it? So many questions.
And then there's the diatom analysis they did on the bills.
Diatoms. Like the microscopic algae. What do those have to do with anything?
Well, these tiny algae can tell you a lot about where something has been in the water, and the analysis showed the money was actually in the water months after the hijacking.
Interesting. So not right after the jump like they initially thought.
Nope. Debunked that theory.
Talk about a curveball. This case just keeps getting weird.
I know, right? Every time you think you're getting closer to an answer, something else pops up. Okay, let's switch gears a bit and talk about the physical evidence they found on the plane.
All right, the clues. Let's see what we've got.
One of the most talked about items is Cooper's JCPenney clip-on tie.
A tie. What could a tie possibly tell us?
Well, believe it or not, they did this high-tech analysis on it.
No way, seriously.
Yeah, and they found traces of rare elements like titanium and cerium.
Titanium and cerium. Those are... Wait a minute, those are often found in the aerospace industry, aren't they?
Bingo. So, does that mean Cooper had some sort of connection to aerospace?
It's definitely a possibility worth exploring.
It's super intriguing, right? Makes you think. Now, what about those hair samples they found? Did those lead anywhere?
Sadly, no. The most important sample, a head hair that could have given them DNA evidence, was lost.
Oh no, seriously. Talk about a missed opportunity.
I know, right? It's a shame. It could have been a game changer.
All right, well, what about the cigarette butts they found? Any luck with those?
Nope, those are destroyed years ago.
Man, it feels like every lead just hits a dead end.
It's frustrating, isn't it? Like trying to solve a puzzle with half the pieces missing.
So let's focus on what we do know. What does the FBI's profile of D.B. Cooper tell us about the man himself?
Well, one thing that stands out is his demeanor throughout the hijacking. Witnesses said he was actually quite calm and polite.
Calm. Polite. He hijacked a plane.
I know, it's not what you'd expect, right?
Yeah.
Definitely not your stereotypical frantic hijacker.
So that points to a certain level of confidence, maybe even experience in high-pressure situations.
That's what the FBI thinks. And here's another interesting thing. Cooper seemed to have some knowledge of the 727. Like, he understood its design and flight procedures, especially that aft air steer, which was crucial to his escape.
Right. He even knew that McCord Air Force Base, where the parachutes were coming from, was only a 20-minute drive from SeaTac, not your average passenger knowledge.
Exactly. It all suggests a level of planning and knowledge that's pretty remarkable. And he was meticulous, too. made sure to demand the return of all his notes, even a matchbook he used. Didn't want to leave any evidence behind.
Smart, I'll give him that. So, with all that in mind, what's the FBI's take on Cooper's chances of surviving that jump?
Well, their official stance is that he probably didn't make it. They cite the challenging conditions, the nighttime jump, the bad weather, the rough terrain, and the fact that he didn't appear to have any advanced skydiving skills.
Yeah, I can see how those would be some pretty long odds.
They are. But here's where things get interesting. There have been other copycat hijackers who've jumped from planes in similar conditions, and some of them actually survived. So,
Could Cooper have pulled it off? Did he survive, or was it a tragic end out there in the wilderness? It's the question that everyone wants answered.
and the question that keeps this case alive, who was D.B. Cooper? And what really happened to him? So who was D.B. Cooper? The million-dollar question, right?
Literally. And over the years, the FBI has looked into hundreds of potential suspects.
Some more promising than others, of course, but there are a few that really stand out.
Okay, so let's hear it. Who are the top contenders in this D.B. Cooper lineup?
One of the most intriguing is Ted Braden. He was a former Special Forces commando with tons of skydiving experience.
Wait, Special Forces. So we're talking highly trained, comfortable with risk.
Exactly. And potentially with more knowledge about aircraft than the average person.
Makes you wonder, right? Could this guy have been involved in some top secret missions?
He could have. Braden was a member of this highly classified unit in Vietnam, MACVSOG. That's the Military Assistance Command, Vietnam Studies and Observations Group.
So secret missions, maybe involving aircraft? Okay, I can see why he'd be on the FBI's radar.
It's possible those missions could give him access to classified info about the Boeing 727, plane Cooper hijacked. Plus, there are reports that Braden was involved in some shady dealings to make money.
Desperate times, desperate measures. Maybe he saw the hijacking as a way out.
Could be. But there's one thing that doesn't quite add up. Eyewitnesses said Cooper was at least 5'10", but Braden's military records list him as 5'8".
Yeah, that is a pretty big difference. But hey, maybe he was wearing those platform shoes that were popular in the 70s, could have added a couple of inches.
You're not wrong about those 70s shoes. It's not impossible. So, while the height thing raises some doubts, Braden's background and his skills make him a compelling suspect.
All right, who else should we be looking at?
Another name that comes up a lot is Kenneth Christensen. He was a purser for Northwest Orient Airlines.
Hold on, he worked for the airline that was hijacked. Isn't that a little too convenient?
It is. And what's interesting is Christensen's familiarity with the airline's operations and the Boeing 727. He would have known those planes inside and out.
Plus, he lived in the Pacific Northwest and was known to enjoy bourbon and cigarettes. Sound familiar?
Just like our friend D.B. Cooper. Even his age lines up with what witnesses said.
Okay, but didn't we just talk about a height issue with the last suspect? Was Christensen tall enough to fit the description?
That's where things get a little fuzzy. Reports suggest that Christensen was also shorter than how Cooper was described. But you have to remember, eyewitness accounts can be unreliable, especially in high-stress situations.
True. People's perceptions can definitely be a little off during a traumatic event. So maybe height isn't a total deal breaker.
Right. And that brings us to a suspect who adds a whole other layer of complexity to this story, Richard McCoy.
Ah, yes, Richard McCoy, the so-called copycat hijacker. Wasn't he the guy who pulled off a similar hijacking just a few months after Cooper?
He was. In April of 1972, McCoy hijacked a Boeing 727, demanded parachutes and ransom, and then jumped out of the plane with the money over Utah. The similarities are pretty striking.
It's almost like he was following Cooper's playbook. But if he was copying Cooper, wouldn't that mean he wasn't Cooper in the first place?
Well, it's not so clear-cut. McCoy never actually confirmed or denied being D.B. Cooper.
Talk about keeping things mysterious. So some people believe he did both hijackings, while others think he was just a copycat inspired by Cooper's success.
And there's a new development that adds another wrinkle. McCoy's children believe their father was D.B. Cooper.
They do? What makes them think that?
They claim that a parachute was found on a property once owned by McCoy's mother, and they believe it was the parachute used in the Cooper hijacking.
Wow, that's a pretty big claim. Has the FBI said anything about this?
Not officially, so we'll have to wait and see how that plays out.
The plot thickens. I can see why this case has captivated people for so long. There's so many twists and turns.
And we've only just scratched the surface. There are a lot of other suspects who've been investigated over the years.
Oh, there are more. Come on, I'm ready for more D.B. Cooper suspects.
All right, let's focus on a few that show just how wild the theories about Cooper's identity have become.
Okay, hit me with the highlights.
There's Barbara Dayton, a transgender woman who actually confessed to the hijacking. She claims she did it to get revenge on the airline industry for not letting her become a pilot.
Whoa, a revenge plot. Now that's a new angle I haven't heard before.
She even said the ransom money was hidden in a cistern near Woodburn, Oregon. But then she later recanted her entire story.
So was she telling the truth or was it all made up? Another mystery within a mystery.
When we have William Gossett, an Army veteran who reportedly showed his sons a key to a safe deposit box in Vancouver. He claimed it held the missing ransom money.
So this guy potentially knew where the money was stashed? Did the FBI ever look into that?
They did, but they couldn't find any solid evidence that connected him to the case.
It seems like everyone had a theory about who D.B. Cooper was or what happened to him.
It's all part of the allure, right? The lack of definitive answers just fuels the imagination.
Okay, so we've talked about the hijacking, the evidence, the suspects. But what about the bigger picture? What kind of lasting impact did this event have on the world?
Well, one thing's for sure. D.B. Cooper's escape had a huge impact on aviation security. It forced the industry to completely rethink its protocols.
Can't even imagine what flying was like before things like metal detectors and baggage screening were standard.
It was a different world. Airport security was super lax before Cooper. His hijacking exposed a major vulnerability, and it became the catalyst for a lot of change.
So Cooper actually made air travel safer.
In a way, yes. One of the biggest changes that came about as a direct result of the hijacking was something called the Cooper vane.
Cooper vane, what's that?
It's this simple but effective device that's designed to prevent the aft air stair of a 727 from being opened during flight.
Ah, so that's how they closed that loophole.
Exactly. It's a legacy that's still shaping air travel today, even though it probably wasn't Cooper's intention.
It's ironic, right? This one man's actions forever changed how we fly. So after all these years, all the investigations, all the theories, where do we stand today?
Well, the truth is we still don't know for sure who D.B. Cooper was or what happened to him. It's a mystery that lives on.
It's crazy, right? We're still talking about this almost 54 years later. You'd think somebody would have messed up, spilled the beans, or maybe some new evidence would have turned up that points to who Cooper really was.
I know. But that's part of what makes this case so fascinating. Like, Cooper planned this perfectly. And then there's the missing money, over $1 million.
Gone. Poof. Still out there somewhere.
Maybe buried in those Pacific Northwest forests, just waiting for someone to stumble upon it.
A real-life treasure hunt. Maybe that's a part of why this case is so captivating. Did he survive? Did he get to spend the money? Was he ever caught?
It's the ultimate mystery. It's like a puzzle with a bunch of missing pieces.
And that missing piece is D.B. Cooper himself. Who was he? What was his story?
Right. Was it just about the money? Or was there something more to it? Maybe he wanted a fresh start, disappear, and reinvent himself.
You have to wonder, what would make someone take such a huge risk?
Maybe it was all of those things. Or maybe there's a motive we haven't even considered, something hidden deep in this case.
That's what I love about Unsolved Mysteries. They let us think, let us fill in those blanks with our own theories. So after looking at everything, the evidence, the suspects, what's your take? What do you think happened to D.B. Cooper?
Did he manage to vanish? Living out his days with a new identity, maybe using that money to start a new life? Or was it a tragic ending out there in the wilderness? Lost forever.
I like to think about it this way. If you were D.B. Cooper, where would you have landed? What would you have done next?
It's the question that's baffled everyone for decades. The FBI, those armchair detectives, even us.
So to all our listeners out there, keep digging, keep asking those questions. Maybe, just maybe, you'll be the one to crack the D.B. Cooper case wide open.
You never know. Until then, keep those theories coming.
Happy sleuthing, everyone.